in terms of social work, it's always been known from research and research all the years, and they've never done it very much, that the best type of housing would be housing that mixed people, as you're just talking about, together. All kinds of diversities together in the same housing, all kinds of incomes, all kinds of people with all different needs, not segregating any particular type, including income, from each other, but together. And that creates a community, just like our villages used to be back in the day. People, and they still are in smaller places where people are together and they get along better that way. But I'm just wondering if there are any obstacles to that within zoning and whatnot, because I haven't seen any projects that do that. All I've seen them is like single type of incomes. A needs assessment would look at, well, do we need teachers? Do we need policemen? And what incomes do they make? And are we building any housing for them? Because I am not aware of us even doing that.
I just wanted to point out the irony is that we as a society created this kind of mess that we're in, really based on segregating people and making huge decisions that had long-standing effects, 50, 60 years ago. Those kind of villages that I think all of us are attracted to here in New England, beautiful, what makes Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire beautiful is because you've got these small villages nestled and everybody's together. Those became illegal because we zoned them out and said, nope, everybody's got to have 5 acres or 2.5 acres or whatever it is, That spread everybody out. We excluded a lot of people, and we purposely had structural racism and other, planful ways to keep people out. And we're now trying to heal from that. And I think we're going to have to do more than just hope it works out. We're going to have to really assert ourselves and say, no, let's do it the other way now and fix those failed attempts, failed efforts, and recognize that they were wrong in the first place, and we can do better going forward. So we can recreate those villages, and I do completely agree that we don't do well when any part of our society is separate from another. Neither population does well. We always do well when we're together. The richness of everybody being there is important.
I'd like to add something to that. I really loved your comment too. The barriers there are some funding barriers around why do we have only senior housing, and you'll see, projects that are senior housing probably more often than you would family housing. And one of the reasons is because you can build smaller units and then you can build more of them. And then the funding is attracted to that. But I think I would agree with you and what Colin is saying. I mean, I remember being on a playground and pushing my kids and, coming home from work on the playground, and an older adult came over and said, can I push your kid? I don't get to see kids. And that's what we know working with so many folks in so many rental units and just buildings all over the state. They like to be with people who have different life experiences and different ages and just different experiences overall. So I think there's a lot of things we could do, but having that conversation, I'm so glad that you raised that.
More often than not, the barrier that we're dealing with to some degree is financial. Trying to fund a project that has mixed income elements to it, or mixed product types, supportive housing with non-supportive housing, market rate housing, below market rate housing. You're dealing with multiple different lenders that don't all want to play in that same kind of environment. And that can be extremely challenging to try and financially engineer a project into fruition. Because of those challenges, they're often looking for scenarios where they've got enough land and enough size that they can build to be able to carry the costs and carry all the perceived risks of the investors and whatnot. And so is the land available? Does the zoning and does the building form allow for a project that's scalable so that it can carry and account for everybody's interests? So they're just multitude of factors that come in.
So you have a lot of demand and not a lot of supply. As Milan's slide showed, looking at the city's housing report and analyzing where the city is at, there was one line in the slide that said, we need housing of all kinds.
One thing we learned is that because of the shortage of supply, we're seeing different income groups sort of cascade down. So I can afford a home at a certain level, and I just can't find a home that's what I should be shooting for from just if you look at it and categorize me on an income basis. But when that home comes up that's technically better for someone who might be earning more than me, I'm going after that because I don't have options, and I'm going to pay more than I'm able to pay, and I'm going to take that unit if I can, and I'm lucky enough to be able to succeed in that. And so I'm operating outside of my income band, either on the, housing that's cheaper for me or housing that's more expensive for me. So the income levels, when we provide a market rate unit, if we provide a market rate unit, it also has the potential to free up a below market rate unit or a unit that's going to be more affordable if people relocate. So the problem or the reality of the housing market is it's an open market. There are very limited ways that we can prescribe who goes in. We can't say this is a nurse's house. It's just impossible to do that. So the house gets built and it can be income targeted, but beyond that, it's very difficult for the city to try and provide for a particular demographic group. It's just open to all and access. And if we don't provide enough, then the different income groups start taking it away from each other. And usually the people who have more means will be compounding the availability or the lack of availability for people with lesser means. So market rate can also contribute to the below market rate solution.
Yeah, we've seen, and you've all seen the housing price in South Portland in the last few years, and so you can have a situation where somebody comes into the state and they can afford to pay $750,000 for a house, and there may not be a house that's really a $750,000 house in the community. And so what do? They ended up paying $750,000 for a $550,000 house. And the person who could have afforded that $550,000 house has to then pay $550,000 for a $350,000 house. And it's Rick's slide of the last 10 years of this $250,000 house becoming a $550,000 house, yet the person's income went from $55,000 to $85,000. It really is, we need housing of all types. And at the GPCOG Summit, the mayor of Portland brought up an interesting thing. We're trying to figure out how do we thread this needle policy-wise. You look at the slide from Habitat for Humanity, and, even somebody who knows how to build affordable housing, they're struggling to even hit that $350,000 to build a house price. And that's with all the tricks that Habitat for Humanity has to make every dollar count, right? So one thing, Portland's pursued is let's tax basically or do inclusionary zoning so rich people houses will subsidize then the low-income housing. And then he said, well, now we've ended up with a barbell where we're building really high-end housing and then that's subsidizing low-income housing. But as you said, in the middle, the housing for the the nurses, the teachers, the firefighters, we're creating that gap in there. And so this idea of how do we build housing of all kinds and make the numbers work? And I've talked to builders, and South Portland is making progress, but one builder told me, I'm building an ADU in South Portland, and it's costing me $50,000 more than it would in the town next door. And so that's a challenge, and we're trying to work with city staff to improve the processes. A lot of these rules, they make sense, but then they add up over time, and they can be contradictory and just a challenge to navigate. And so, we have a city council who has recognized this in the housing report, and they've really said that missing middle housing is a top priority. So I think everybody is getting on the same page, which is exciting. But while we're on the same page, it's still going to take time, as Milan said, and we need to stay on the same page. And so at the next time there's a housing opportunity, we need to figure out how is this going to work for our community. And we also need to figure out how do we support the decision makers and not get mad over one project we didn't like and never build anything again.